right. So next up, we have an awesome presentation coming our way. It is with Laura Kusto, who is the Senior Director and Global Practice Lead, Stay by BCD, Travel, and Advito. Laura is going to be speaking with us today about savings beyond sourcing, a dynamic approach to hotel category management. Laura, how are you today?
I'm great, Ryan. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for asking. Would love to turn things over to you, but just want to remind the audience that Laura will be going live at the end of the presentation. So there's a chat box window that's going to be at the bottom of your screen. Please make sure to submit your questions there, and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. Laura, I'll turn things over to you.
Great. Thanks, Ryan. All right. It's wonderful to be here with all of you at ProcureCon Travel. Thank you all for joining. So I really think that this is such an exciting time to be talking about travel with respect to just the larger procurement conversation. One thing that's always fascinated me about working in corporate transient travel is that it really mimics, if you think about it, not a B2B experience like most other procurement categories. It's more B2C, because you got to think about it. Who's ultimately making that final buying decision? It's your travelers, your hundreds and sometimes thousands of travelers. And so we're going to talk today a lot about, when we talk about savings beyond sourcing, we talk a lot about traveler engagement and engaging your travelers. And that's really how we're going to move the needle on making some long-lasting change in the industry. And so a little bit of an agenda here. We're just going to kind of go through why you can't do what you've always done with respect to transient hotels now, how to reset and future-proof your program. Then we'll really get into that savings beyond sourcing, and also how to use merchandising in your travel program. So with that, let's dig right in. In terms of, you can't do what you've always done. This is all really related to COVID. Although I will say doing what you've always done and making a change from that has been a theme that we've really been encouraging the last few years. But if you take a look at, for example, what's happened now in the last few months in light of COVID, here within our consulting practice, we shop for rates every single month. We've been doing it for years, and we shop tens of thousands of hotels. And this right here on the screen is just a snapshot of some of the data that we've been capturing the last few months. And what's on the screen is this average year-over-year change in the best available rate by market. And so you can see how the rates are deteriorating. Take a look here at Milan, Italy. So in March, for example, the rates were 5% lower than what they were in 2019. And then you can see they just deteriorate on from there. And so this right here is just, we don't usually see this, obviously. It's all due to COVID, but this is impacting your hotel programs right now. What does it mean? What are you supposed to do? All of your static rates that you negotiated last year are non-competitive. They've either lost their competitiveness or they're outright priced higher than the best available rate at every hotel right now. Moving on to another way that the landscape's changed and why you can't do what you've always done. Hotel cleanliness. I think, if I recall right, this topic came on the scene pretty fast and furious at the end of April. And the velocity with which this topic came on the scene has created a lot of fragmentation. You think about it, every major hotel chain came out with a program. I think they're all great programs. They're all, of course, trying to do the right thing and trying to keep their hotels clean, trying to elevate that standard of cleanliness in light of COVID. However, for those of you who are responsible for procuring hotels, putting hotels in front of your travelers, and ultimately your job is to build the trust. Your job is to reinstill the confidence at the individual traveler level in conducting a regular business trip. So how do you take all of this fragmented information from the chains and put it in front of your travelers in a streamlined way, in an efficient way, and most of all in a way that instills their trust in making a business trip again? So our advice here is don't get lost in the mess. There's a lot of information. Ultimately though, you have to tackle it and you have to figure out what's right for your company and right for your travelers. And finally, I think hotel participation is just unreliable right now. You can't rely on hotels to necessarily meet you at the negotiation table this year because they have fewer people on staff. Some hotels are closed. At the central level, we're finding gaps in those national account teams that some of you are able to work with. And so, when I think about this, I actually think that this could be a really good thing, because you think about what we've been doing every single year. And again, you got to think about how hotels are ultimately procured, how your travel is procured. It's hundreds of thousands of travelers that are ultimately making that final call on which hotel they're going to stay at, what flight they're going to take. And you are relying on, if you think about it, you're relying on the suppliers to meet you every single year at a negotiation table, to sit down and have a thoughtful discussion. You're relying on them to value your business and give you a competitive rate, to load that rate. And then all you're doing is, putting a little preferred designation to it and telling your travelers they should book preferred. But if you go out there and you look in the booking tools, those preferred rates don't always look like the best deal. They don't look like they're the most competitive rates for your travelers all the time. And so again, you've got to think about how this appears to those travelers. And take Amazon, for example. If Amazon simply relied on the suppliers and trusted the suppliers to put good value in front of the consumers and never went out there to look and see how it was actually appearing to the consumers, would they still be in existence today? I don't think they would be. And so we've got to think about it in terms of the end user experience. And then, again, going back to this whole reliance on the hotels to participate, it's really outdated and antiquated thinking. And I think it's time to look at things differently. It's time to put you back in the driver's seat with respect to driving the savings for your program. So with that, let's jump into how to reset and future fit your program. So there's a couple of things here. Really, I like to throw out the word thoughtful. We need to take a thoughtful approach. We can't do what we've always done, but we can leverage what we know and then look at the new landscape, again, all these factors we just walked through, to come up with a thoughtful approach. So first of all, let's talk about this managed program that you've got in front of you. You've got static rates. You're probably getting offers to roll over those 2020 rates into 2021. A lot of the times the chains are offering to float a discount alongside those. But what do you need to do here, really? I think first of all, you need to sit down and forecast your travel volumes. You need to take a look at, take 2019 data. What did you do in 2019? What's going on in your business now? How much will you be traveling next year based on the business, and reforecast those volumes? And they should go down. I mean, think about it. How much are you traveling today, and how much will it really increase back to that 2019 level? So from there, once you understand the number of room nights you plan on bringing to a market, you need to consolidate your hotels. You need to be thoughtful. Again, we had 6 hotels in this market based on 5,000 room nights. Now it's 2,000. Well, we should probably drop that down to 2 hotels. You want to make sure you're bringing a good amount of business to a hotel if you're going to ask that hotel to meet you at the negotiation table this year. And last, I think that it'll go a long way if you actually have a relationship with that hotel. So reach out to that hotel. These are hotels too that they should be your top properties. That relationship should already be in place to some degree. So those are the hotels that you're going to want to sit down with, talk to them before you send the RFP, and tee up some of these things. Talk to them about how thoughtful you've been about forecasting your volumes, what's going on in your business. It'll go a long way in progressing the relationship. Now from there, when it comes to the rates and the process that you follow in securing them, we think that there's a couple of things you can do to both future-proof your rates and the investment of time in this process. The big one here is on the left, shifting the majority of your rates to dynamic. With COVID, we're seeing a lot of ups and downs. We're seeing, the virus will spike, and then a country will lock down, and then things will ease and they'll open it back up. And so we don't foresee this trend to necessarily stop. I think we want to prepare for that to happen. We don't know how much, but again, it's the safer route to go to expect that it will happen, maybe occasionally at a minimum. And so when you think about that volatility, and the rates when that happens are going to go up and they're going to go down. And so the best way to ensure that you've got a rate that's always a discount is to secure a dynamic rate, a percentage off bar. So when you do this, also make sure you find a provider who can audit those rates. Dynamic rate auditing is actually something that we've invested in a considerable amount of time this year. We started in January, and during COVID, we've we've secured the process and automated it with our rate audit supplier. And so I'm really excited that we're bringing dynamic rate auditing to our clients this year. We will also be auditing amenities. Again, I don't see a lot of other consultancies out there doing that. I haven't really heard of any that are. So this is a really exciting thing for us at Advito and Stay by BCB Travel. So make sure that you've got someone who can audit those rates, because you know you're going to want to. But if you think about it, when you secure these dynamic rates, another benefit is you can set them to evergreen, meaning they never expire. And so next year, you don't need to touch them. Again, we're future-proofing your rates and the investment of time in them. And if you think about a static rate, that investment of time that you make every single year, and money sometimes, of course, and then you get the static rate. That value of that static rate in reality is deteriorated versus an evergreen dynamic because of that time investment. So that's something to keep in mind as well. And on the right-hand side here, there's another strategy. We're going to get into it a little bit more. It's around anchoring, but sit down. You know, you've done all this work to set the negotiation, to set your volumes and determine the number of properties. Take it one step further and determine what rate you want, and then send that to the hotel in advance. Give them as much data as possible as to why you want this specific rate, and then tell them if they offer that as their first offer in the RFP, it's immediate acceptance and we're done. So those are a couple of things that you can do to really just set this whole process up to be efficient and to also not take as much time and money in following years. So another aspect that we want to mention here is, again, we think about how programs today are largely just static rates. We want to diversify by adding dynamic rates. And another way you can diversify is to take advantage of all of these really creative ways that hotels have started to structure their rates in the last 5 to 10 years. Their revenue management techniques have gotten much more advanced. They've come out with all these really creative rate types. So you can prepay for a rate versus paying for it after the stay. And if you think about it, how's that any different from how you buy your airline tickets today? So why not take advantage of those, especially if they're booking the hotel last minute? Restricted versus non-restricted rates as well. Those are rates that have varying durations of cancellation policies. We have an example of that here on the screen. You can see one of the rates here, the 223, has a 24-hour cancel, and the one on the right has a 7-day cancel, and it's significantly lower. On the left here, this is some data across our BCD client base, but 25% of our client, again, 25% of stays across our client base are actually booked within 48 hours before check-in. So if your traveler is booking and they're booking their hotel 2 days before they get there, why wouldn't you want them to book this rate here on the right? What are the chances that they're going to cancel at that point in time? So again, there's significant savings to be achieved if you open up these really, again, creative rate types that the hotels have started to put out there and market. All right, and last, a great way to future-proof your program is to also dynamically manage it. So instead of taking a look at it just once a year, looking at it throughout the year, and take a look at these different trends. These are things that we monitor on a monthly basis across our client base. We look at what they're booking and what they've negotiated with respect to the overall market rate. So it's back to that rate shopping that we do in the market rate. Is the weighted average best available rate that we're finding at the hotels in the market. And so when we see different trends emerging, we take different types of action. I've got them 4 very common scenarios listed on the screen here. So Hotel C here, for example, is an example where we see this a lot when we inherit programs that we haven't traditionally negotiated, where for whatever reason, they have a negotiated rate that's significantly higher than the market rate at that hotel. And they're actually booking less than what they've negotiated. So this is a prime example here where we need to renegotiate this 160 down to something significantly below the 120, or we need to remove that hotel from the program because the client doesn't have enough leverage at that hotel, clearly, to get a good rate. So Hotel B here, this is a great example where rate availability is poor. They've negotiated 150, which is a good deal, but they're booking 160. So that means that that negotiated rate is not being made available to their travelers enough. So it's driving their booked rate up. And so again, it's really important to take a look at these trends. I think clients really like to see benchmarks versus their competitors, but I got to tell you, all your competitors are doing what you're doing. Their starting point is your starting point. This is taking it a step further. It's looking at the overall market dynamics and how competitive is your rate to what's available to the general public. So that's future-proofing your program. Now we want to get into a little bit more of the savings beyond sourcing, and I want to open this part up with a couple of statistics. You got, so what we have here on the screen, we have 65%. 65% represents average rate availability of an LRA static rate. We monitor the rate availability for our clients, and we actually chase it to get it higher. But right out of the gate, if you do nothing, we find that on average, the rate availability of your static rates is about 65%. It's not great, right? And then the 70% represents the amount of time that your rate is the most competitive out there on the open market. And when you multiply those two together, you gotta love multiplying fractions and percentages, you get 45%. So that means that your LRA static rates are the most competitive, and your travelers see them on the screen as the most competitive, the best deal, only 45% of the time. So again, going back to thinking about how you manage corporate transient spend and how to drive savings, 45% is all you're getting out of that managed program. And there's so much more that you can be doing to drive better outcomes across that spend. And so a couple of things we're going to walk through here as far as savings beyond sourcing. The first one is hotel price assurance. My boss loves to talk about hotel price assurance or rate shopping. It's just a slam dunk. It's something that everybody should be doing and implementing in your managed travel program. And really, you just see what happens here over from the time that your hotel is booked here on the left to the time of the actual hotel stay. The rates are going to keep fluctuating, right? The hotel's best available rate, they're always adjusting it. They're managing their revenue based on their occupancy. And so between the booking and the actual stay, hotel price assurance it monitors those rates. And when it sees an opportunity and market softness, they rebook the rate. And this is a really great thing that once you implement it, you can also market it to your travelers. You can say, hey, what? We've got your back. We've got hotel price assurance in place. And even if you book your hotel and rates drop between the point of booking and the stay, we're going to rebook you. And we're going to make sure that you're getting the best deal. So again, hotel price assurance, it's a slam dunk. We really think everybody should be using it. And next, I want to get into something that is, I think, one of the most creative ways that you can really drive savings. And it involves using something that we call a rate target. And rate targets, they leverage behavioral economics principles. And the principle I want to talk to you right now is called anchoring. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of you have heard about this already, because we talk about anchoring a lot, and it's just fascinating. But what is an anchor? So really, an anchor, again, it's a behavioral economics concept that says that in a negotiation or any sort of a decision involving numbers, the biggest predictor of the final value agreed to is actually the first value that's mentioned in the negotiation or the decision discussion. Now, going back a few slides, I talked about sending the hotel the rate that you want before you open the RFP or ask them to bid. When you do that, you are setting the anchor for what rate will ultimately be determined. And if you think about how you traditionally do this, what do you do today? You just release the RFP. An anchor is still involved in that discussion. You just don't realize that it's there maybe all the time. But if it's a repeat preferred, the hotel is using their prior year preferred rate as their anchor. That's their starting point. So when you set the anchor, you're setting yourself up for success. You're using the data and intelligence that you have in front of you to give someone else, whether it's the person you're negotiating with, or in this example, we're going to use anchors across your traveler base. And it helps guide them as far as determining what is an acceptable hotel rate to book. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of how this might look in your online booking tool. So this example here is a rate cap. A rate cap is probably the most traditional anchor that you've used in your programs with respect to marketing some sort of an anchor to your traveler. But what is a cap? A cap is a do not exceed. So your travelers can't go above that. So this right here, this little skinny banner, is marketing a rate cap to your travelers. It says, when staying in Atlanta, you absolutely must book below 250. So again, it's a do not exceed. It's a violation if you go above it. And so if you're a traveler, just think about what goes through your head when you see this. You say, okay, well, 250, I've got to stay below it. But as long as I do stay below it, I mean, I can book right up to that, right? So your travelers probably are going to err more in that, like, 235 to 250 range. Now let's flip this and change it to a target. And a target would be, the value of a target is what would be considered a competitive rate in Atlanta. And again, we use all of our data and analytics to determine these appropriate target values in markets across our client base. But for example, if the rate cap in Atlanta is 250, a rate target would be significantly lower. It always is. So it might be something around 210. But now how you market the target to your travelers is also different. It's not a do not exceed. It's almost like, I bet you can do it, or you should try and do this. But for example, in this screenshot here, it says, when staying in Atlanta, aim for a rate around 210. It doesn't matter always so much exactly how you market it, it's the value. The value is the most important thing. So again, 210 is in their heads. They're looking at the list and they're going to try and stay somewhere around that 210 range. So when you do that, think about marketing a 250 versus a 210. You're going to drive your average booked rate down just by doing that. And we have a client who did this. I actually have a case study to show you that it works. So this particular client, they used rate caps. And here's some cities that were on their list. You can see here over on the right, these are the actual rate caps that they had in those markets. On the left, you can see what we call their market rate. The market rate, again, is leveraging the shopping data that we have. So it's, when we computed this, it was the weighted average rate of the hotels that they were staying at in that market. So you can see, man, this is interesting. They've got market rates that are significantly lower than their rate cap. So they're actually encouraging their travelers to book more than the publicly available rates at these hotels. Well, we went in and we lowered those rate caps to reflect 10% off of the market rate. And we just simply changed them to target rates and marketed them slightly different to the travelers. And we achieved some really great results. Again, we lowered the rate caps to 10% below the market rate. And we achieved 4.9% savings in markets where they didn't even have any preferred properties. They actually, in going through this exercise, realized that they could reduce the number of markets that they covered in their program by 55%. So you think about it, like I talked about, putting yourself back in the driver's seat. Instead of negotiating hotels in 55% of your markets, you just implement rate targets and you control the spend in those markets. You're not relying on suppliers to make rates available to you. And then even in their program markets, they achieved about 2% savings. Again, those are the markets that traditionally you've got good coverage, you've got good relationships, good leverage, and pretty good rates. So you're going to achieve less savings there. Okay, now from here, I want to talk a little bit about merchandising. Again, thinking about your travelers, they're consumers and they buy things in their everyday lives. I mean, think about how often you use a web application or a mobile app to procure something or do something. They're used to this. And then when they log into your booking tools and the experience is outdated and they're not being marketed to and they're not being guided, it really degrades their confidence in your program. They look at these tools and they think, this is so weird. And it's not even conscious sometimes, it's unconscious. And so I want to give you some examples of how you can use modern merchandising techniques in your booking tool. And we've got some really great screenshots here. But the first example is an actual example of a client who used merchandising. What they did is they wanted to drive more share to Delta Airlines. And so they partnered with us and we created some banners to insert into their online booking tool. And you can see the results here. We monitored the shift in share that we were able to drive to Delta to meet their contractual obligations with that airline. The beginning of March, we had nothing in place. Their share to Delta was 25%. We implement the banners, and the following week, boom, the share went up to 65%. The week after that, we hit this nirvana moment where everything was going to Delta. And then over the next 6 months or so, things leveled out at about 75% share to Delta. So again, it's amazing what just directing your travelers at the moment of booking can do, again, with some just really great sleek marketing, things that they're used to seeing already. And so here we've got some more examples. This is a hotel example, a screenshot of, when you bring in more content into your booking tool. Again, we're talking about maybe some of those alternative rate types or alternative content. Again, we're big fans of, bringing in all sorts of content into your booking tool. But this banner here on the left, it ensures your travelers that you've got good content, that they don't need to go out of channel. They don't need to go look at booking.com. You've got that content here in your OBT. Another example here, let's say the traveler just booked their hotel. You can build in to have a banner up here. They just booked their airline. You can build in on this screen where it says, would you let, this is a very common Concur screen where you've booked your airline. Now, what could you add to your itinerary? Well, let's put a banner up here and say, you've booked your air, why not hotel? Also, throw in some great creative language around, we can better assist you in a case of emergency if you do it. Great duty of care, especially right now in light of COVID. This example here, this is how you could market those prepaid rates, right? Or the restricted rates. Hey, does your trip start in 3 days or less? You know what? Go ahead and book that non-refundable rate if it's the best deal. Again, guiding them to make the decision that you want them to be making. And this example, last year, help guiding your travelers with tips and tricks to get better search results. So this example here, maybe they've set their radius, really low, or, just, hey, did you know that if you expand your search radius in Concur, you might get different results. So again, it's just using modern merchandising techniques, things that they're used to seeing already as a consumer in their everyday lives. You bring it into this experience that they're having in procuring corporate travel, and you mimic that. And then unconsciously, I swear, you're driving a much better experience for them, and they want to stay in channel. So again, this is really exciting. It's a really exciting time. We think that so many companies have so far to go as far as procuring better hotels for their transient travel. And it just takes looking at things in a slightly different way. But again, if we look at the consumer-based experiences out there, they're really great guideposts for this whole topic. So again, thank you for joining. We'll be going live here in just a minute, and I look forward to answering your questions.